Good morning, everybody. Let's give everybody a few minutes. Roberto, will you let me know when we have a little more people here? We'll try to go at like 8:05 or 9:05.
Sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's Roger Jimenez. I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
All right.
Good morning, everybody. We'll wait about 2 more minutes. City Manager Blair said that he will be about 2 minutes late. Have we already anything from the sheriff? Is the sheriff going to join us? I don't know who else we're missing. Roberto, have you heard anything?
No, sir. I haven't heard from the sheriff whether he is or is not attending.
Okay, so we'll just give everybody 1 to 2 more minutes, and then I will start the meeting. Roberto, did you hear anything from Mr. Wheeler? Have you heard from him? Was he joining us?
No, sir. I did not hear from him.
Okay.
Ms. Byers, can you hear me now?
Manager Schaefer, we can hear you, or I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was just saying that because Melissa Byers had indicated in the chat that she couldn't hear anything. No, nobody was talking, so I was just seeing if she was able to hear once someone said something. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, everybody. I will call the special RECC board meeting into order at 9:05. Could I get a roll call, please?
Yeah, hold on one moment. She's still having audio issues. I'm walking her through it right now. I'm sorry.
Okay, that'll work. Just to give everybody an update, we're just waiting on our recorder. She's having audio issues, so we'll just wait a few more seconds.
Chief, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. Sorry to be late.
We can't hear you talking, but can you hear us?
Yes.
What if she logs off and then logs back on?
She's gonna call in. She's gonna be a call-in user, so she can.
Okay.
Just a couple more minutes. Sorry, guys. You, Melissa?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've never used WebEx before. I'm used to Zoom.
Okay, Melissa, are you ready? And I'll start over.
Yes, yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, so I want to like to call the special RECC board meeting on September 27th, 2023 to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Moya,
Yes.
Chief Jimenez,
Here.
Sheriff Mendoza. Is he here? Is he there?
He is not, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Chief Joy,
Chief Joy's on mute. He's here.
Sorry, I'm here.
okay,
There it is.
thank you. Chief Black,
He's here also. He
Thank
muted
you.
himself.
thank you.
Chief, I'm sorry. Manager Schaefer?
Melissa, if you want to pause for just a second, we're hearing you on both now again.
Okay, hold on a second.
I'll sign
Sign
out
out
of
of the other one.
Well, hold on a
Hold on a
second.
second.
Schaefer,
Present.
thank you. Manager Blair
Here.
and Member Wheeler. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. I would like to move on to 1C, approval of agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda before we approve it?
Yes.
Go ahead, Director Lujan.
Mr. Chair, the amendment I have is for the presentation under option 1 for Converge 1 to reflect a change in price of an additional $31,100.
Okay, let's say that one more time. So the 902,700, we need to increase that by 32,000?
$31,100.
Okay. Any other changes before we move forward? Can I get a vote on approval of the agenda?
I'll move to approve this, Chief Jimenez.
Thank you, Chief Jimenez. Can I get a second?
Greg Schaefer will second.
Thank you, Manager Schaefer. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Chief Jimenez,
Yes.
Chief Joy,
Yes.
Chief Black,
Yes.
Manager Blair,
Yep.
Manager Schaefer,
Yes.
and Chief Moya.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on to, just because it's here, I don't know if we have any, but 2, public comment. Do we have anybody in here on public comment before I move on to the action item? Then I will move on to action item. The action item for today, a presentation and request for approval of the RECC data center relocation option and related costs among the 3 options. 902, 731,100. Option 2 would be relocation, 4,192,000, and replication would be option 3, and that'd be $5,348,000 or $5.348 million. I'm sorry, I messed that up. Let's just go to the presentation.
John Lawrence, did you want to share your screen or did you want me to share the PowerPoint?
Good morning. If you could share, that would be helpful.
Okay, one moment.
Before we get started, Manager Schaefer would like to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously we can have additional conversation surrounding this as we move forward. But I did want to set at least expectations from the county's perspective. So as the slide goes through, you can understand at least where the county sits vis-a-vis cost. On option 1, the county's view is that is 100% the county in terms of those relocation costs, as it is cost necessitated by the county's provision of space for the RECC. So from the county's perspective, that is 100% Santa Fe County. Option 2 and option 3, as those are, efforts to, in essence, accelerate the purchase of capital expenditures in association with the move. We would be looking to the partners to contribute to, the cost of those capital costs, net of what we would have incurred in any event to move it. So as you look through those options, I wanted to say that up front so that you had the benefit of at least where county staff views the cost shaking out, because I didn't want us to get off on a start out the dialogue or start out the presentation without at least an understanding of where we were coming from. So again, not asking for anyone to subscribe to that view, but I did want to level set that expectation from our perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Manager Schaefer, for setting that. We will go right now into the presentation.
Thank you very much. And Manager Schaefer, I appreciate you putting that setting the expectation from the beginning. If we can move to slide number 2, please. Or I'm sorry, number 3. So while we're waiting for that to load, my name is John Lawrence. I've come before the board before in representation of the county. We've worked together with the city and other groups on projects recently, including the cutover to the state system back before Zozobra, and most recently this past weekend in a power shutdown at the RCC building for some maintenance work. So, sorry, I lost the presentation there.
Yeah, something's going on here with my computer. I'm trying to share it and it's splitting it onto 2 separate screens. So give me one moment.
No worries. And while the presentation is being brought back up, I wanted to make a correction on the listing of costs. With the addition of the $31,000 mentioned earlier, the total cost for option 1 is $933,800. Okay. Whenever you're ready. Yes. Okay. Can we go ahead and go to slide 3, please? Okay. So discussing the options themselves. The first option is what I believe had been planned from the beginning of this project, which is literally to relocate, pick up and lift the equipment that is in the current RECC building and move it to the new building. Option number 2 is to replicate the data center hardware. And in this particular option, that's including the dispatch consoles, and then transferring the engineering software, licensing, maintenance, etc., to that new hardware in the new building. The third option is a complete replication to duplicate the current data center and dispatch floor with hardware, software, and licensing, creating a redundancy. That is, we would actually have 2 separate data centers and dispatch floors. I understand that historically there's been discussion about creating redundancy in cases of emergency, and this option leads to that. Any questions so far?
No, I think we should just let you, Mr. Lawrence, go through the presentation, and then we'll ask questions after.
Excellent. Next slide, please.
Next one after this is slide 4.
Yes. Okay, so this, oops, back one, there you go. For the data center relocation, that would entail literally picking up and lifting the equipment, including the RECC Vesta Rack and NetLock. That would be performed by Converge one of our vendors. The RECC dispatch and microwave antenna to be located by Motorola, and the RECC CAD and associated hardware, which would be relocated by the Santa Fe County IT group. In order to minimize the disruptions with this move, the equipment would be moved in blocks the belief is the blocks would take about 15 hours. And in each block, there's the potential to be down for up to 2 hours. We included an additional bullet saying additional blocks is needed as we identify any additional things that we believe are important or necessary for the move. And those block assignments will be determined as planning continues with our vendors. Next slide, please. All right, so on this slide, we have a breakdown of the cost between the vendors. Converge one at $85,200. Motorola for the dispatch move being $747,200, and the microwave antenna move, which is $101,400, and a total of $933,800. In our planning for this particular option, as Manager Schaefer mentioned, this cost would be taken on by the county as it is part of the original plan for the move. So this is option one for your consideration. Option two, as you see, it is all the exact same equipment. The difference is instead of relocating the existing equipment, we will replicate that equipment in the new facility, but maintain the existing or transfer the existing licensing, software, maintenance agreements to the new equipment. Okay, thank you. As you can see, we've included the cost for replicating that hardware. Again, Converge one with the Vesta rack and the net clock are $735,000. Motorola for the dispatch, including a cost of $150,000 per console, comes to $2.43 million. The replication of the microwave antenna is still $101,400. The reason that price hasn't changed is because that is a purchase that was going to be made anyway as part of the relocation of equipment. And networking infrastructure hardware is going to be roughly $20,000. I put a subtotal on this particular screen because the price extends to the next screen. This includes additional hardware licensing, the CAD licensing, GoCirco hardware based on previous purchases, Smart 911, Pro QA, ARC GIS server, and the PDS solution are all roughly $4,000 a piece, except for the CAD, $12,000. GoCirco hardware is $8,000. We also included a 10% increase for any missed information or markup because these estimates were based on our previous purchases, which adds an additional $381,100, bringing us to a total of $4.192 million. Again, this estimate is based on the assumption that the current licensing and software and maintenance agreements would transfer to the new equipment. We've also included a cost of $100,000 potentially for an additional FTE for support in managing that new equipment. But that is something that can be discussed at another time. Thank you. Again, option three, same hardware, but this is a complete replication of the existing facility, including not only the hardware, but the licensing, the software, and the maintenance agreements. You would have two separate functional data centers and dispatch floors with this particular option. Next slide, please. Again, the costs for the purchase of the new equipment are all the same as in the previous option. $735,000 for Converge one, including the Vesta rack and the NetLock. $2.43 million for the dispatch move, including the $150,000 per console for the 13 consoles. The microwave antenna move, $101,400. In this particular slide, we included the SUA agreement because we would have to replicate that. And that adds an additional $488,600. Networking infrastructure and hardware, $20,000. Next slide. All right, to replicate the CAD, including all of the hardware and licensing, would be an additional $974,783. The GoCirco hardware, again, would be $8,000. However, replacing the smart, or I'm sorry, replicating the smart, duplicating the smart would be an additional $51,839, $840 if we round up. Pro QA replication would be $15,126. The ARC GIS server would be an additional $15,000. PDS solution would be $22,419. And the 10% increase for misinformation and markup would be an additional $486,216, bringing the total to $5.348 million. Yes, Manager Schaefer.
John, I didn't want to interrupt, so just go ahead and finish, but I did want to raise my hand for when it's appropriate to take questions or offer comments. So go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We're almost finished. So the last slide brings total cost for each of the solutions. Again, option one, the pickup and lift, moving of equipment from the current building to the new would be $933,800. Option two, replicating existing data center hardware. That includes the console for the dispatch, but we would be transferring the software, the licensing, and maintenance agreements to the new equipment, bring us in a cost of $4.192 million. And option three is completely replicating in the new building everything that is in the current building, bringing us in at a cost of $5.348 million. Next slide. All right, questions and next steps. So Manager Schaefer.
Mr. Chair, is it okay if I go ahead and ask my questions?
Yeah, I think if we can stop sharing so I can see everybody again, because Roberto, and then Manager Schaefer, you'll go first.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, on option three, I think if we could confirm that is really at this point theoretical, because while we've had talk of redundancy and this talks about the equipment, to the best of my knowledge, there's no space programmed where we could set up a fully redundant RECC center. So that's my understanding. And again, don't hesitate to correct me if I'm misinformed, but I do want us to narrow in our conversation. It's not as if we have another building set aside to accept that equipment or to replicate the bullpen. Am I mistaken in that regard?
You are not. You are absolutely right. This effort was to provide this body with as much or with varying options so decisions could be made with information. In my two projects with these groups, I found that information comes at a premium and decisions have been made very quickly with that information being shared. So we tried to give all options.
Oh, I'm not being critical, John. I just wanted to make it clear that unless Manager Blair is going to house all the consoles in his office, it's not as if option three is really something that we could implement because we don't have the space. So thank you for that. And in that same vein, relative to option three, and again, it's for clarity, not by way of criticism, we haven't attempted to estimate thus far in your work what the additional operational costs would be to maintain that equipment, in terms of maintenance agreements. I see the SUA2, that's a replacement agreement, but I didn't see any reference to the actual maintenance agreements and also associated, again, electricity, et cetera. So am I right in that we haven't estimated the operational cost associated with having a fully redundant system, even if we had the space for it?
We have not. We wanted to, because this was such a short turnaround for getting in front of the board. We have not had a chance to do that type of analysis, but if that was something that the board would like us to do, we can make that happen.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We have more questions on the floor.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple.
Sure, Manager Blair, go ahead.
Thank you. Slightly off topic, but just real quick. I know at our last executive meeting, I raised the question about whether or not we could start posting these meetings online. And I'm curious to find out if that's happening from this meeting.
Yes, the meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded.
Cool. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Pardon me, Director Lujan. Sorry about that. So I guess my first question would be, who from the city of Santa Fe was representing us in these meetings that led to this decision, that there's this urgent need? Because I'm not aware if anyone from our team has been included in this up until we got a crisis phone call on Friday telling us there was an urgent need for money. And I know a few meetings ago, we had a really long conversation about everyone's commitment to ensure that the city of Santa Fe was at the table as these decisions were being made. And I don't think that's happened. So before I even get into the actual content of my questions, I'd like to know procedurally who from the city has been involved.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Manager.
Go ahead, sir. No, please, sir.
From my understanding, this was an information gathering effort. No decisions have been made unless, and I will defer to Daniel Sanchez if I'm incorrect, but no decisions have been made at this point. It was specifically to provide information to this body so decisions could be made.
I appreciate that, Mr. Lawrence. Thank you. So I understand it's just information gathering. Who from the city was involved in the information gathering? And who from the city has been involved in any meetings that led up to the realization that this IT issue was arising?
I don't have an answer for you at this moment. I've historically had good conversations with Joe Beta, and we've met with Larry Worstel on the other projects, but I don't believe we specifically asked either of them to participate in this effort. It was actually something that I shared with the leadership that we should be gathering information to provide. So that would be on me. And if there needs to be more inclusion, that would be my fault.
Mr. Lawrence, you seem to be a good man. You fell on the sword the last time we had this conversation, and you're doing it again. I don't believe it to be your fault, but it shows me the content of your character that you're willing to take it for the team. And so even just at the onset of this conversation, I am struck that the city continues to not be included in the planning around this building. That, to the best of my understanding, the city had no say in whether the building was going to be constructed at all. The materials that I've received, unless I'm missing a document, no, that's the case, please correct me. I'm not aware that we've even seen a budget for the project, how much the whole project's going to cost. We're being asked to potentially commit our governing body to millions of dollars for a building we didn't want, didn't ask for, didn't approve, without any more documentation than a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm a little struck by that. I'm not looking to get fired anytime soon. And so I'll be fully candid. I don't know how I can support committing my governing body to spending millions of dollars without them losing their minds. And so, not to belabor the initial point, but I am gobsmacked that we are back at a place where an emergency meeting has been called. There have clearly been discussions, at least at the county, I presume, and the RECC, about this urgent need, how to pay for it, how to come up with options, what led to this. what caused it, we don't know any of that. And so, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? We're back at the same place that we were a few months ago regarding what appears to have been a empty commitment to ensure that the city was being treated and considered as an equal partner to the other partners at the RECC. So to say that as frustrating would be an understatement. Mr. Chair, I have a number of questions here sort of to discuss. One of which would be, and I'm not actually even sure who is the best person to talk about this, but at least with an option one, and I've got the PowerPoint that was emailed to me this morning, pulled up here on my computer on my other screen. And within option one, I'm going to guess it's slide 4 was the relevant one. I don't know that it's important to bring back up or not. But there's a breakdown that discusses, in order to minimize disruptions to the center, equipment moves will occur in planned 15-hour blocks to complete the relocation. The first block has 2 hours of downtime. The second block has 2 hours of downtime. The third block has downtime for 2 hours. And then an asterisk of additional downtime may be necessary, or additional blocks may be necessary, is what the PowerPoint actually says. So I guess my first question is, how long are we going to be down? This doesn't seem to indicate to me any sense of confidence that it's going to get wrapped up in 3 blocks, and so we'll be down for 6 hours. Are those consecutive hours blocks? Is it down for 2 hours and then up and running for a day or two? Is it down for another time? What is the plan to do that?
So following the input from the board, we are meeting with the contractors and the vendors who will be doing the work. We actually had a meeting with Converge One yesterday. We'll be meeting with Motorola in the future, where they would provide their timetables. Converge One has provided a timetable that has us down anywhere from 36 to 48 hours, but that is based on interactions that they would need to have with Motorola and our own county IT group in terms of moving. In having those conversations coming up after decisions are made, guidance is provided, we hope to crash that schedule and bring that number lower.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. And so I understand in your comments there, 2 things. One of which is you made a point to reassure me that you'd be working with county IT. Would city IT be involved in that at all?
Absolutely.
Just didn't mention this. Okay. My second question is, so we're talking about potentially being down for 2 full days. Hopefully not, right? Hopefully not, but what is our mitigation plan to serve our residents during that window?
Mr. Sanchez has raised his hand. I believe he can address that better than I can.
Well, Mr. Chair, this is Daniel Sanchez, Manager Blair. Just to take a step back, the overall project meetings, sorry, it took me in Blake, so I was trying to get the names from Rod Lambert, who is the project manager for the overall project. Tim Farrell, Sam Burnett, and Laurie Worstel have been invited to all of the overall project meetings. So they've been included in the building, that portion of it. The information that we're presenting today is purely informational. We wanted to give the board options. Again, once we get direction in which way the board would like to go, we'll have a kickoff meeting. We'll, at that point, similar to the power shutdown and the transfer to the state core, we'll have members of the city, obviously, Joe Beta and Larry Warstel and whoever else you guys deem part of those meetings. But just wanted to level set that those people, Sam, Tim, and Larry, were invited to the overall project meetings. And this presentation is just really, they're really somewhat of gross estimates, because once we get direction, then we'll get into the details of how to move forward.
Appreciate that. First of all, Mr. Sanchez, nice to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Yes,
the name you mentioned was Tim from our city staff. Who is that?
Tim, I may have gotten the name, Tim Farrell, I believe his name is.
Okay.
Okay.
Was there a reason that you all elected not to include Joe Abeta or Audrey Abeta or the people who are working on the project?
Well, I know we invited Larry from an IT perspective. I'm not sure how, to be honest, I had to find out why Tim and Sam were picked. I'm not sure. I just got those names from the overall project manager for this effort.
Do you know why Larry was selected instead of Joe, who's been working on the project?
Larry has been our contact for IT, so I mean, we made a bad assumption, but we reached out to because he's been participating in some of the other meetings from an IT perspective. I know Joe Beta is the project manager, so I didn't know. And we probably should have hindsight, obviously should have included him. However, Larry was more the technical resource that we were including.
Okay. I appreciate that. I just, the year and a half, 2 years I've been doing this now, I've never seen Mr. Wurtzel at any sort of an RECC meeting at all. And so I sort of feel like that would be me picking a,
Understood. Well, I will reach out to Rod Lambert and ensure that Joe is included in those invites.
Okay, I appreciate that. So then, again, are we just gonna, I don't know that, I appreciate the clarification, Mr. Answers. To go back to my question, what is our plan when we're down for 36 to 48 hours? Are we just gonna ask everybody to stay at home and drive with their seatbelts on and be safe, or what are we gonna do?
No, absolutely not, sir. Manager Blair, I think that again, once we get the direction on which way to take, we'll get more definitive timelines and answers. I think what we would do in conversations with Director Lujan, and he can chime in, we would leverage our affiliation with Sandoval County, our sister location, to take emergency calls and dispatch from that location during the time frame. Again, the intent for option one is to, as best as possible, minimize downtime. As we found out very clearly with this last exercise with the power shutdown, anytime you take down IT equipment and bring it back up, there's always a risk of issues happening, and we address and correct those as quickly as possible. But if I could ask Director Lujan to kind of chime in and speak to his ability to dispatch out of Sandoval.
Thank you, Manager Schaefer. Did you want to go first, or did you want me to explain?
Well, I'll jump in real quick. So I just want to say, so we got to pick one of these options. This is not a choice. Is that correct? So we got to go with the million or the 4.1. This is not an option. If we say no to all these, you don't move. Is that what we're saying here today?
So I think we're looking for, Mr. Chair, we're looking for direction on which option. Absolutely. I think if I had more time to have a graph, it might be more easier to explain. But so with option one, it's the quickest point from A to B and the least cost. As you go to option 2 and 3, the cost increases as well as the lead time. Right. So those, as Manager Schaefer for option 3, that's kind of pie in the sky where we need to get a building across town preferably to do this. So option 3 may not be an appropriate choice. Option 2 is again introducing new hardware and purchasing of that new hardware, and the lead times for any new hardware is exorbitant. I mean, we're talking 26, 32 weeks. So again, just to
and we didn't even ask for this in the budget back in March, right? So we didn't even think about this. So
exactly.
So we really much are tied to the hands of one option, but that option has to happen, because if we don't agree to this today, Roberto's staying in the current building, and we're gonna have a brand new building sitting there. Is that what we're saying here today?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, we're trying to get just direction or buy-in on which direction to go on. And
well, we're not. There's just no direction. We have to do option A, or we don't go to the new building. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So well, we really are just tied into a corner here, because we were never told this, especially on the city side, and we basically are going with option A if we have to, or we don't move building. Is that fair to say in the board?
Mr. Chair, I think if option 2 were recommended by the board, to be clear, we would follow the normal process for getting capital expenditures approved by governing bodies and those agreements memorialized. So I don't think it's fair to say that there's no choice. I think it is fair to say that something has to happen for the move to occur. So I think that is fair to say, but I wouldn't go so far as to say there's not a choice on offer. And with regard to the contingency plans, I just was going to say, and Roberto's going to address it, we just went through this exercise with the power outage, and there were, as I understood it, 2 contingency plans relative to how dispatch was to occur. So I don't think we'd be reinventing the wheel relative to planning for those, but I let Director Lujan address that.
Okay, Director Lujan, go ahead.
Yes, so we actually tested this because we had the planned electrical outage that occurred Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. We were able to communicate from Sandoval County, receive 911 calls and dispatch all radio traffic from Sandoval County. They are our sister agency. We have an MOU with them to use them as a backup when needed, and then they can use us as a backup when needed as well. So our operations would just move to Sandoval County for the time that we are down during the move to the new building.
Okay, and if we're down for 2 days again, are we going to not have image trend and calls populating and this weekend was a nightmare, especially for EMS calls. We basically didn't have calls for 2 days, and we were manually putting them in for 2 days. Is that if we switch and do this, is that going to make it a week? That's not acceptable. 2 days was a nightmare, and I thank you, Roberto, for all of your work to do this weekend. And I don't think everybody else on the call knows how bad it was with image trend down and not getting the calls populating in. That it was a nightmare for us, and we were getting emails every 30 minutes saying it was down.
Yeah, I mean, with the servers going down here at RECC, the modules that function off those servers would be down during that time frame, unless IT can figure out backup or redundant backup plan to the redundant server at the Sims building. That's the only way we could have some of those modules still functioning during the move.
So, Mr. Chair, I would agree with what Director Lujan said. We would take the approach of best effort to minimize downtime, obviously moving over components one at a time. So by moving, say, Converge 1, we'd have to identify which pieces of REC would also need to move at the same time and move them in blocks. Again, with IT, unfortunately, there's no guarantees necessarily. Again, this weekend was an incident where we took the power down, brought it up. We had a router that just did not come up cleanly. It just faulted. Fortunately, we had another one in place, and then we worked throughout the weekend to get all the routing and required networking in place to get that up in place. So you're absolutely right. It's unacceptable to have any downtime, especially in this environment with public safety, and we understand that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Chief Joy, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Mr. Chair, what you had said regarding the issues that arose from the power outage over the weekend, because it does tie the CAD and whatnot does tie into our RMS as well, and so we had to. Director Lujan's staff was great in what they're able to do and try to help us out. So I want to make sure that I'm not trying to put anything on them at all. But our guys, they ended up having to do reports twice because we had to put them into another system that doesn't work with OSMCT. They do it with tracks, and then do these reports again. But some of these, the case numbers, we were getting after the fact because unless someone, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, it seemed like they're having to handwrite the case numbers over at RECC and keep a log and then send them to us kind of as things are going along. But it wasn't a great experience on our end either.
And Mr. Chair, Chief Joy, I don't want to say that I understand your pain. However, several of us were working off a 3-hour sleep since Friday to get this up and running. We exhausted all of our resources, all of our partnerships to get this up and running as quickly as possible. So we definitely understand how difficult and challenging it is to work on those systems without that information. And again, that is never the intent. The intent is always have little to no downtime.
Mr. Lawrence, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to address a point that you were making earlier about there isn't a choice. A lot of the reason for the request of this discussion, option one is part of the plan for the move to the new building, right? Before we committed those dollars, we were looking at other options that might be better because of the difference between the options. Option one obviously has us down for a potential extended period of time, which I believe everyone agrees here is not something we'd like to see. Options 2 and 3 give the option of lessening that downtime because you would have equipment in place. You're not physically having to disconnect equipment, pack it up, move it to a new building, start it up, test it, and then start working on that system again. It would have new equipment in that building, drastically reducing the estimates for the downtime. And that's why we wanted to bring the options before this body, so decisions could be made not just on cost, but in terms of things that might be, and I don't want to minimize this at all, inconveniences for the individuals that are dealing with this work. Safety is not an inconvenience. And so I apologize for choosing that word. It was just something I came off the top of my head. But the purpose was like to
Mr.
bring
Lawrence,
this
I'm
to
going to ask you this question, and I'm going to
Yes, sir.
interrupt you because I think what I don't understand is if we go with option B, that means we're going to do this in the next month. And so we've already done our budgets and we're going to have to go back and ask for a different budget and do a thing, or is this going to be July of 2024 when we go back through budgets? Me, Chief Joy, and Manager Blair go back and ask the governing body in our new budget, or are you asking for this money in the next month?
I believe it would be pushed out because, as Director Sanchez said, the lead time for obtaining the equipment is lengthy.
What is lengthy is the question.
I'm sorry, John, just to clarify. So he's talking about the lead time for ordering equipment. In order to order the equipment, obviously we have to front the money, right? Somebody would have to pay for it in order to order the equipment. And that could extend the project overall because the lead times could be 26, 32 weeks out. So it pushed that effort out. But in order to get the funding in place, we would have to, as Manager Schaefer said earlier, we'd have to coordinate that effort and cost amongst the entities to get the project started. So I just want to clarify that, John.
Thank you. Manager Blair.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a variation on the theme of the question that was just asked. The last meeting we had, regular meeting, or maybe it was 2 ago, we were told that the department, new building up and running in November. Is that still the plan? What if we vote down no? What if we vote yes? What's the likelihood that we're still moving it? What's the timeline?
Mr. Chair, Manager Blair, I can take an effort to answer that, and Elias can correct me if I'm wrong. The timeline for the building, excuse me, is on its own track. I have not been made aware of any significant slippage in terms of the building hitting its substantial completion dates. And Daniel Sanchez, you can speak to that as well. This is an issue of relocating RECC operations, to that building, and it influences that timing. That could have ripple effects on the overall project, but again, that's on the county side. For now, we're focused specifically on RECC, and if the board wants to go forward with accelerating those capital replacement costs, how that factors into the overall time frame for the relocation. I hope that answers the question as I understood it.
Sure. Thank you, Manager Schaefer. Mr. Chair, I guess one of my questions is, I've only been here a little shy of 2 years. So I wasn't here when I guess the decision was made to build a new building and move the RECC. Does anyone have any institutional knowledge? Was that a county decision to build a new building and move the RECC? Did anyone else did the city have a say in that? If the city had said no, would it not have happened?
Mr. Chair, Manager Blair, I believe that this has been discussed for years, and this board, meaning the folks who are currently on it, have just this calendar year, if I'm not mistaken, made a recommendation and approved increasing and finalizing the overall budget for the building, which again, the county is, absorbing 100% of those costs related to the building as well as the furniture, which is approximately $6 million, I believe, in change. So that's all on the county side. But this board has taken action, relative to the project. And I believe, again, its genesis extends back, many years. I would have to personally go look at all of those meeting minutes, but my understanding has been it's been in the works for some time, and it has been identified as very much a need for RECC operations, as their current space is suboptimal, to put it mildly, and also too small for their operations, let alone any future growth.
Mr. Chair, thank you, County Manager Schaefer. That it doesn't really answer my question. I appreciate there's been discussions for years about this and some subsequent action items related to it. But what's unclear to me is whether or not did either the RECC board say, yes, we vote to go back and have this be a thing that our governing bodies approve, or did the decision to build the building and to move the RECC? What I'm trying to identify is, if you recall from a few meetings ago, great effort went into sort of telling us that, oh, we've been talking about this all along. It was a shock to at least Team Santa Fe 3 or 4 meetings ago when the presentation was made by Director Lujan about how the move was going. And we said, wait, what move? What are you doing? What's happening? And I know that your deputy county manager went to great lengths at the presentation to show us when there had been tacit references to it in the year before. But I guess the point I'm trying to make, this is why I'm asking the question, is if the city had no involvement in making the decision to build a new building and move the RECC within the new building, I don't understand why we're now being asked to help pay some of those costs.
I'm sorry to
Director Lujan, go ahead. I'll have you. You can have the floor.
Thank you. So just going through previous history of board meetings, November 15, 2018, there was discussion of the new building, and I would have to go further back to research when it was approved. But in this, I can share my screen, but in here it states that former county manager Miller asked former director Ken Martinez to talk about the construction with the RECC board, in which she did. And it looks like the deputy county manager, Mr. Flores, explained the construction project and that they were going to award the contract in January of 2019, with the construction completion to be done sometime in December 2019. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it was discussed in the November 15, 2018 meeting, and I'm assuming prior to that as well, as it wasn't brought up as something that they were surprised by. It was just something that they wanted information on.
Chair, Director Lujan, I appreciate that information. That's helpful. Still doesn't quite get to my issue, which is the city being notified after the fact of a decision to build a new building and move the RECC is different than the city being asked to approve the decision. And to me, even this conversation we're having now seems to be the broken record of a decision was made without any inclusion of the city or asking their approval. And then we're being notified of it, or we're discussing it after the fact. But we had no authority to make that decision. So I guess the confliction for me, Mr. Chair, is if the city had no involvement in approving the building, approving the plans for the building, approving the plans for how IT would be incorporated into the building, into how the budget was being set up for the building, and how the money was being spent. But now we're discussing that we potentially owe, if we pick option 2 or 3, 7+ figures of taxpayer dollars based off what, if I can quote slide 10, are gross estimates of how much this will cost. And so I guess for me, I want to get some answer of who and when was the vote to build the building and to move the RECC. Those might be 2 different things. And then a secondary question for me, Mr. Chair, at this moment is, what happens when it turns out these gross estimates are off and there's another $1 million that has to be paid? Are we coming back for another emergency meeting and going through this again? Or How will that be handled?
Manager Schaefer, you have the floor.
So first, the JPA says that the county shall provide a building for the RECC operations. So that is what we have done. That is what we are doing. I appreciate and don't want to lose sight of the fact, however, that the space that currently exists isn't adequate. And we need to upgrade the facility at RECC, which has been a recognized need for years. So I don't want that to be lost in any of this discussion. The county has not asked the city to contribute, nor has the county asked the town of Edgewood to contribute to the cost of the $6+ million facility, nor are we asking the city or the town to contribute to the cost of relocating the RECC to the new building that we're providing per the JPA. What we are offering to the city and to the town is an option if you would like to stage the relocation in a different way by accelerating capital purchases that would need to be made at some point in time in any event, that we would be willing to listen to that and make that recommendation to our governing body in terms of an additional cost that is not necessary for the project. That's really the issue that's before us today. Is the county has the obligation under the JPA to provide the building. That's what we're doing. Option one is completely at our expense, and we'll move forward with it as necessary if that's the only option that is available to us. But if the partners would like to evaluate another option that has an additional expense and reduced risk, not eliminated risk, but reduced risk by accelerating capital purchases so that we replicate equipment in the new facility, as a partner, we're willing to listen to that and we'll be willing to make that recommendation. That is a significant cost that we wouldn't lightly recommend, but if our partners are interested in that and willing to contribute to it, we would certainly move that forward in good faith to our governing body. We have many other expenses on the horizon relative to RECC, most notably the replacement of the CAD system, which, as we all know, is coming end of life. I would rather and would recommend that we invest those additional resources towards that joint goal and joint effort. But again, we're willing to listen if the partners want to accelerate capital purchases so that the relocation can be accomplished in a different way.
Mr. Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Jimenez.
So, is this an action item? Are we voting on this today? Is there something that we need to take action on?
In my opinion, we have to. We don't have a choice. If we don't go with at least option A, and the county pays for everything, then the RECC board is not, RECC, Roberto's group is not moving. If I can speak front or clearly, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that is correct.
Okay. Can I get clarity on that?
Director Lujan, if you don't mind, I think, so for sake of time and everything else, I mean, in discussion, I'll just say what, as far as the town of Edgewood is concerned, we are at a flat budget this fiscal year. There's no way we can go forward and ask for more money, especially that amount. I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm out of the office, so I didn't get a chance to review the request. But definitely think that, you know, if we can take an action item on option one, it sounds like everybody is in the same boat, that that's the only way we can move right now. So.
If that's a motion, Chief, I would second it.
Sure, I have a few more questions.
Yeah,
I'm happy to
I'll
ask them after the motion's voted on.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor from Chief Jimenez, and we have a second from Manager Schaefer to go with option A. Manager Blair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like the last conversation I was included in, the decision had been made to leave the data center in the existing structure and that there were concerns about antennas on the new building not working and not providing coverage. I'd be curious to get some update about what changed and whether or not we think that these updates are, those issues have been resolved. I'd hate to see somebody spend millions of dollars to find out the antennas still don't work, which I think we identified 4 or 5 months ago that was the case. And again, maybe there's a decision been made, we just haven't been told, but I don't have any awareness that that was resolved.
So, Manager, this is Daniel. So we did have initial conversations, and I do know that the city was involved in some of those conversations. So we take a step back. So we chose to move. Obviously, the floor had to go, the dispatch floor of the consoles. In meeting with our partners, we determined what equipment had to go with those consoles. So meaning CAD and Motorola and those pieces. And that's where we kind of started going down the path of option one. The antennas that you're talking about, I'm not sure if you're referring to the point-to-point that we're adding. That is a redundant system in case there's fiber connecting the two locations. The point-to-point was added in a redundancy effort to ensure that there was connectivity between the two locations because not all the equipment is going to be moved to the new RECC data center. Some will remain in, but what was determined in those meetings with vendors, the city, the county, was that we're going to only take the stuff that's necessary, right? So the consoles, the Motorola equipment, the CAD, GoCirco, Converge One, those type of systems. Does that help?
No, kind of.
Okay.
When was the decision made to go ahead and move the data center?
We'd have to go back and look at meeting minutes, but it's been some time, and that's where we started going down the path of trying to plan this out. And obviously, when we got to a point, Deputy Manager Elias wanted to kind of make sure that everybody was on the same page as far as here's all the information that we have, and I think that's what this intention was really just to provide here's all the information that we have and we know, and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Chair, if I can ask you or Chief Joy, if the decision was to make sure everybody's on the same page, were you all aware that this decision had been made? Just so you know.
I'll say I was notified last week by Director Lujan in a phone call to have emergency meeting. That was the first time I was heard to war over this. And I called my team.
Mr. Chair, maybe I misspoke. I didn't mean to intend that everybody's on the same page before this meeting. I think this meeting was intended to get all the information out and available.
Sure, thank
you. So at least the RECC and the county were on the same page.
Up to this point, we're planning the process.
Chief Joy, were you in the loop on the decision,
or? Manager Blair, Mr. Chair, no, I was not.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask a follow-up question. So are the antennas being moved from the old building, or they're going with the data center, or are we still running extension cords across the road, or like what's happening?
Manager, but I believe the antennas are, Jason, maybe you can speak up, but I believe the antennas for the for Motorola are being moved to the new location.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Manager Blair. Yes, those antennas are not being moved. We're installing brand new antennas for the point-to-point. That was already quoted out, and we already have funding for that allocated for that move for the new antennas to be installed.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. When was that decision made? And who was a part of that?
And I guess, Manager, are you talking about, again, the redundant antennas, or what antennas are you specifically talking about?
Well, the ones that Mr. Dixon is referring to there that there's already funding for, and the decision to move and leave the existing antennas where they are and put new ones up.
So that's
something we voted on as a board?
And I think that was a recommendation from those meetings that we had with the city and Motorola. in an effort to provide redundancy. So I don't know that decision, the point-to-point came to the board.
So are
But
those capital costs, the antennas, or not so much?
it's $100,000, so I don't know where that would lay in the process, but it is new equipment.
So
Jason.
sometimes we need to be consulted and sometimes we need to vote. Sometimes we don't need to be consulted and sometimes we don't need to vote. But now that it's a bigger dollar amount, we're being asked to pay. That's sort of rhetorical, Mr. Chair. I apologize for that. An additional question for me would be, I'd be curious to find out, is there a recommendation from Director Lujan?
Obviously, for public safety purposes and the greater safety of the public, it would be best to duplicate the equipment, but I understand that is a massive cost and something that's probably not feasible right now. So I know that other dispatch centers have picked up and moved, like option one that we have, and have done it successfully. There is obviously going to be downtime incurred with that. We do have a plan to back up to Sandoval County for that time if needed. And so, I mean, best case scenario for dispatch, RECC, and the public would be option number 3, and to identify a secondary dispatch center as a backup. But that's obviously going to take a lot of time and effort to get that done. So that's something we can maybe consider down the road. And for now, option 1 seems to be the most feasible option.
Thank you, Director Hahn. I appreciate that. You know, this all kind of reminds, I don't know if any of you ever watched the TV show Modern Family. It was real popular about 10 years ago. There was an episode where the main sister, Claire, and her brother-in-law, Cameron, were flipping a house together. And the way that the sister, Claire, would try to manipulate Cameron would be to throw a bunch of numbers at him and spook him. She actually at one point used the term 11D5, which is a term that I use in my staff when I feel like they're throwing budget numbers at me. And the brother-in-law, Cameron, what he would do is he would say, you know, he would really want like this thing that cost $1,000. And so he'd say to the sister-in-law, well, here's this option, it's fine, it's $1,000. And here's this other one that's $1 million. What do you think we should do? And so she'd pick the lesser one because it was the more feasible of the two. And so I will tell you that I sort of feel like I'm in this similar sort of a place where I'm being asked to either potentially put our residents in jeopardy by doing what's feasible, or go back to my governing body and say, guess what? We need another 2.5 million. And they're going to say to us, well, didn't you already vote on the RCC budget for the year? Yes, we did. Well, then why are you doing this again? Well, I don't know that I have a good answer to that. Didn't we plan for this? Doesn't seem like it. I know that the last meeting we had with them when Motorola participated, this would be back like July or June, actually June, I want to say, when we talked about the need for redundancy and the decision to go forward to have that redundancy. At that point, there was none of these numbers existed. And you know, I don't know in good conscience I can vote for any of the 3 because I don't know that we have enough information. I haven't seen the budget for the building. I haven't seen how much the cost is. I don't know that I've seen, you know, we're on track-ish for the building to be done. But in what I could say would be about, what are we, like 4 weeks out of what we were told was going to be the move, 5 weeks out? That suddenly there's an additional $5 million in costs to do this the right way that nobody planned for or thought about. I mean, Mr. Chair, if this passes, I'm going to make you be the one that has to go before the governing body and defend why we got to do this. Because yeah, I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Manager Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm reiterating that, you know, the building is necessary, and the existing state, and Mr. Lujan can correct me if I'm wrong, is not tenable in terms of long-term, robust public safety dispatch. There's no room for growth. We're attempting to address that need at substantial cost. We have systems in place to ensure that our dispatchers are able to continue to dispatch from our sister location and lift, move and lift, lift and move is a project methodology that has been and can be successfully deployed. And we will move forward to implement that in consultation with our partners in a way that minimizes disruptions to all of our systems. So I just want to state that very clearly, that if the inference is that we're being cavalier with public safety, I don't think that's fair. And I don't want that to go unaddressed. But we have a motion, we have a second. I'd call for the question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. We have a motion on the floor. I'll just reiterate the motion on the floor so we're all on the same page unless we have more discussion. Motion on the floor is to go with option A at this time. And that is to proceed with manually moving all the equipment over to the new building when it is ready. If I'm saying this anything wrong, please correct me. And the county would pay the whole amount to do that location at this time. Is that a correct motion? I'll ask Mr. Jonas to jump in to make sure I don't say that wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think you stated the motion correctly. And I will also advise the board that because this is a capital expenditure in excess of $100,000, it needs a majority of the full board, which is 6 out of 8 is required. So, is that right, Mr. Schaefer?
Jonas, I disagree with that. Again, this is from the county's perspective. This is part of the building that we're obligated to provide. So again, if the board wants, our partners want to recommend a different option, they can. But this is, in at least the county's view, this is our obligation to provide a building. But in any event, that's the county's position.
I see. So you're saying that there is really no capital expenditure being requested of the board here. It's just the county, and so therefore it doesn't require the supermajority.
That would be the county's view. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that actually. So I think we only need 5.
Okay, Mr. Jonas, hold on one second. Manager Blair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Action item 3A in the agenda lists all 3 options in one letter. It's all letter A. And so I'd like to get some clarification for the record as to what the option is that we're voting on.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Chief Jimenez.
So I apologize again. I'm on the road. I can't see, couldn't see the presentation. So whatever the option is that we've already discussed in previous meetings, I believe it was the $900 and some thousand option is the one that I initially made the motion for. So I don't know if that's 3A1, however that's listed on the agenda.
Thank you, Chief Jimenez. Yes, and we're just getting clarification on what, are we going to remove those into 3? Can we do that? I don't know. Mr. Jonas, can you help me with that?
The motion as made and as I second it was for the relocation option, which was described as option 1 in the PowerPoint. That's what I understood the motion to be, and that's what I seconded.
That is what I was also to believe. So yeah, option 1.
Okay. Manager Blair.
I'm sorry, man up. I I have some additional questions. I don't know that they're timely now that the motion's been made and the question's been called. After I vote, I will ask to explain my vote so I can ask those questions there. But needless to say, there are some unanswered questions about this strategy that I think are dangerous for the public.
Thank you, Manager Blair. There's no further questions. Is there any more questions? Then I'll call for a vote. Please call the roll call, please.
Yes, Chief Joy,
You here? Yes, and I'll explain my yes after.
okay. Chief Black,
Yes.
Manager Blair,
No.
Manager Schaefer,
Yes.
Chief Moya,
No.
Chief Jimenez.
I'm gonna go with, yes.
Thank you. The vote is 4 in favor of the motion and 2 against. I'm not sure if that passes the motion. Mr. Attorney, does it pass the motion?
Yes, I believe it does.
Okay, thank you. And the motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. I'll let Chief Joy have the floor.
All right, Mr. Chair. I'm pretty frustrated by the process here. And really my yes is because I think I understand that the issue that the RECC is dealing with, and I empathize with them. I think the redundancy would be the preferred option, but also they haven't had one up to this point. And we're presented with 3 not desirable options seemingly quickly while these discussions have been had in the background. So my vote is for the least bad option right now. But I think I agree that a redundancy would be needed in the future. But I think in the interest of making progress, that's why I voted yes.
Thank you, Chief Joy. Manager Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did ask for clarification on the motion itself. I'm not sure that happened. If the minutes reflect that we voted in favor of option 3A or item 3A, that includes all 3 options. And so I just want to get some clarification that the record will reflect that the vote that passed was for the relocation, which was the least expensive option, and not that we would do all 3.
Mr. Jonas, can you clarify that for me, please?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chair. Manager Blair, I think that the board seemed to be on the same page that this was for the relocation option, which in the PowerPoint was noted as option 1. I think that was the understanding of the board. And so I think that the motion that was made, and I think Chief Jimenez also confirmed that was the motion he intended to make. So I think there was a clear motion on the floor for the vote. That was the action item.
Sure, Mr. Jones, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. I disagree. It clears it up. I asked to get an accounting of a vote that happened some 5-6 years ago, and we don't even know if the vote happened. And so for me, just to get clarification as much as possible is helpful. So I feel like we got pushed into voting for something that this board rejected doing in June. We didn't even discuss, as the questions that were raised back in June, what happens when we unplug the computers and run them across the street and plug them back in and it doesn't work? There was no discussion, Mr. Chair, of how we would be able to protect. Are we just going to rely on Sandoval County for in perpetuity while we keep turning the computers on and off in hopes that at some point they trigger back on and they work? These were all bad options, and I dare say intentionally so. And options 2 and 3, which involved asking our elected officials to vote for millions of dollars There was no supporting documentation. There's no budget. We didn't even see the estimates that were given. How did the county and the RECC get those estimates? Who are the estimates from? Who put that together? Did we check with other sources to find out if that's the case? Is this the least affordable option? Is it the most affordable option? Did we go through procurement? Is this something that, like, there's all these questions that I am repeating in part because I can foresee what would happen if our governing body were being asked to vote on this based off a PowerPoint that we received this morning. So, not to beat a dead horse, but this notion of good partnership is just continuing to prove not to be true. And I'm trying to imagine a scenario where we'd ask the county commissioners or ask the city councilors to vote potentially on making $1 million decision based off PowerPoint presentation without there being an FIR or documentation about how much the costs were. I didn't get an answer to my question. What happens when those gross estimates are way off? What happens if the cost for relocating, for unplugging and plugging back in are off? Or is the county going to consume those too? What about any costs that come up when the computers don't come back on the way they're supposed to? How are we handling that? Who's paying for that? What do we tell our residents? Oopsies, the RECC board voted in June not to do this. Meetings were held, ostensibly. City wasn't necessarily a part of all of them. Some of them maybe. Someone made a decision that these were the 3 best options. City wasn't a part of that. But there's an urgency of a Friday afternoon phone call to a Wednesday emergency meeting that this absolutely has to happen now. I thought that I heard as one option is that I appreciate they need more space. They need to grow. Y'all should come work to the city of Santa Fe offices. We're busting at the seams. But that doesn't necessarily mean rushing to make a bad decision of the best of the bad. While probably not ideal, I think that this should have been something that was included in the budget process this last year. We never answered the question why this wasn't part of the budget process. Did those who were making the decisions not consider the implications of how our IT might play a role at the RECC, where I would dare tell you the IT implications at the RECC are likely the majority of the implications of the work that they do? So it wasn't important last March when we voted on the budget, but this day in September, it had to happen today. And that doesn't seem true to me. And so this, I think this is bad for the RECC. I think it's bad for the RECC board. I think it's bad for the residents of Santa Fe County, Edgewood. Anyone who touches in this place happens to drive their car through our county in what potentially could be days, hours, weeks of downtime, because we're just gonna wing it and hope it works. And I just have to tell you, I think that's really reckless and dangerous. And I regret that we had to even hold this vote today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Manager Blair. Do we have any other comment before we end? Manager Schaefer, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, if I could, thank you
Hold
very
on,
much.
Chief Jimenez, Manager Schaefer has the floor, and then you'll go next.
Yeah, I apologize. I yield to you, Manager Schaefer. Sorry.
Thank you, Chief, and appreciate, again, the support in moving this forward. Relative to redundancy, what was before the board and what the city declined to move forward was a recommendation that we actually invest in a mobile dispatch capability, which would provide redundancy that's not site specific and tied to a specific site, and could be deployed in a variety of different situations, including, this one. County stands ready to move forward with that recommended purchase. If we're talking about true redundancy that is available in a variety of different SWAN events. So I want us not to lose sight of that. And when you're ready to revisit that issue, you'll have a partner who's willing to make that investment so that we have that redundant capability that can move. I'm not going to grandstand in terms of the other comments, but I do appreciate everybody's time today. But I did want to go back to the question and issue of redundancy, because there was a capital purchase put forward specifically for that purpose, which the city, to the best of my recollection, wasn't prepared to move forward with.
Before I go to Manager Blair, I'll go to Chief Jimenez, and then Manager Blair, you'll go next. Chief Jimenez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to also echo, this isn't the optimal choice or choices that we had here. My reason for the vote, just for the record, was so that way we can move forward. It's my understanding that we've been waiting for this move long before I got here to the town of Edgewood. And, while it's not optimal, I will say, and I believe, Mr. Nahum, if you can concur or maybe add your expertise, I believe we can, as a board member, if we want to bring something else back to the table, or even bring the vote back to rescind it with some other options, we have that option as well. Is that correct?
Mr. Jonas, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. Mr. Jimenez, I'd have to look into the process, the parliamentary process to bring this vote back. But I think, it could be possible.
Okay. Thank you. So, if there is better options, something else that we want to look forward, my biggest thing is that we try to get this up and running. I'm always open to talk and discuss. I truly feel that something to this magnitude and something this important would probably should have been discussed, or at least given to us in a more ample amount of time, so that way I could have been there in person. I definitely would have liked to discuss this further, but unfortunately I didn't have the time today. So just wanted those thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Jimenez. Manager Blair. Okay. Is there any other discussion before? Sorry. Is there any more discussion before I adjourn? I will call the RECC special RECC board meeting to adjourn at 10:31.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.